we're gonna be live streaming this talk in our stores in Stockholm, Gothenburg, and Malmö. Hello, up there. And of course, there's not gonna be anyone in the audience recording and taking photos and stuff. I see you. So just turn off all the phones for mic reasons and just like enjoy the moment, be here and now. And we're so happy and proud to have Martin here, George R. R. Martin. I think he's for us in the bookstore, he's definitely our biggest writer right now. And I think that's true in like most bookstores right now.
Nice to hear.
And so you're like the rock star of the literature world right now. And of course, we're so happy to invite Linda and Elio, who has written the book, The World of Ice and Fire. And we're actually gonna start with Linda and Elio. Have you tried if your mic is gonna behave horribly?
Testing.
Is it on?
I think it's, yeah, it's working.
Yeah, it's working. Because we prepared some frequently asked questions. Like Martin gets asked a lot of the same questions, and I think you guys get asked a lot of the same questions. And so we're thinking maybe just get those out of the way first.
There's several questions that George is very often asked. Who is his favorite character? That is Tyrion. Who's the hardest character to write? That has been Bran, because he's a kid. No, George doesn't write anywhere else other than his office. He's tried, it doesn't work. And the next book will be out sometime shortly after it's finished.
All very true, yes. Those are good. But my least favorite question is the one, who's going to finish the books when I die? I'm not planning on dying. I'm hoping to live forever, so there we go.
That sounds like an excellent plan. Like maybe some vampirism, I think would be good. Yeah? Yeah. And so, does anyone feel like they have a super interesting question to start off with? Yes? Yes, good, awesome. I'll be on with the mic.
Yes, hi, my name is Virginie. I had a question actually about the writing process for Winds of Winter. Because, well, as we all know, Feast for Crows and Dance with Dragon was divided geographically. And I was wondering how challenging was it to write Winds of Winter with all this added character, and if you feel like you had to shorten some storyline.
Well, I'm not finished it yet, so that, you know, who knows what I'll discover by the time at the end, but I'm not planning on shortening any storylines. I am also not planning on dividing it. We're not going to have another set of two parallel books, so the books that did part for those two volumes are reuniting. There will be a, how do I phrase this? Between the two books, when you put them together, there's an excess of viewpoint characters. So some of them may not survive the the action to come, but you know, we'll see about that.
There was another brave soul who had a super interesting question. Awesome.
Hey George, my name is Axel Gage, and first of all I wanted to say hi for my friend Maddie who couldn't be here today. And my question is really a little bit strange, because I'm from a city not far from here. You may have heard of it. It's called Westeros.
Yes, I was asked that this morning. No,
Yeah.
it's purely coincidence. I'm afraid I'd never heard of your Swedish Westeros.
Right, exactly. So
I-
just as like a related one, when you envision your city specifically, like King's Landing or White Harbor, those kinds of places, do you think of any real-life cities that you compare them to, like Stockholm maybe? I don't know. What do you think those cities look like in your mind?
Well, I've never actually been to Stockholm before this, so I couldn't really evoke that. You know, to a large extent, these are based on, obviously not places I've been since I'm not a time traveler, but they're based on what I've read about actual medieval cities, medieval Paris, medieval London, primarily the ones that are, most information is available in English. I wish I could read more of the medieval history of other countries, but sad to say, those books are seldom translated into English, and I have no other languages. Not even Dothraki and High Valyrian.
We have a question from our store in Stockholm, and they want to know if you have any tips on how to write better dialogue, and if you have like some authors that are favorites. With just dialogue.
Yeah, writing dialogue is something that Hollywood really helped me with. You know, when you read a script, it has a different format. It's easily researched. If any of you are interested, just buy any good reference book on screenwriting, and you'll see the format. And the dialogue is presented in blocks with much narrower margins. And an experienced screenwriter, as I discovered when I went to Hollywood in 85 and 86 to work on Twilight Zone, they don't even read the dialogue, they just look through. And if they see large blocks of dialogue, someone giving a long speech, they know it's not going to work. This is not Shakespeare where we want characters delivering soliloquies for 2 pages. They want to see short dialogue, a line or two, back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. And that's the kind of dialogue that tends to work. The other key to dialogue is reading it aloud. So I'm about to give a reading, I'll be doing that here. When you read your work aloud, you hear the speeches that work, the speeches that don't work. You can get a good feeling for that. So something sometimes looks good on a page, but you actually try to deliver a line and it stumbles. Let me ask a frequently asked question here for Elio and Linda, because I get this one all the time, but you can answer it, is how did we come to write this book together? And how did I meet you guys, and how did you get involved in the world of Ice and Fire?
I'll start it off because it was, back in '98, I think, 2 fans emailed you out of the blue and asked, hey, we want to make a game based on A Song of Ice and Fire, can we have permission? And George, having roleplayed himself in his time, after some discussions with publishers and lawyers and agents, said, oh, yeah, okay. And we started a website, kind of to be for players, but we had stuff like heraldry, and George thought, hey, that's really cool, and here's my notes that I've got on hundreds of families that you haven't seen yet. And then 2004, I'm visiting the US after having gone away for a few years and visiting my family. We're doing a cross-country trip, and I realized, hey, we're passing by Santa Fe, so I called Linda, I think, and then she contacted you and arranged for us to have dinner. And it's at that dinner at the Bull Ring.
Was it the Bull Ring?
It was the Bull Ring, yeah, steak place, yeah.
Yeah.
That's it. You mentioned, like, you, me, and Paris, and you mentioned, hey, these publishers are talking to me about doing this kind of world book thing, but I'm busy with Feast for Crows, and I'm going to need help doing it, and would you and Linda want to write it? And that was, I'm pretty sure I said yes. I may have made some strange, vague remark about maybe having to check with Linda, but I knew the answer. 2 years later, we signed a contract in Anaheim, and here we are. It was, it wasn't, I don't know. It's to me, every time I think about the strange series of coincidences that led to this moment is mind-boggling to me.
No, I think that's the big part of it, really. It was all a very strange experience in that, we started it all, as Elio told you, we started with the idea of making this game, and we started the website with the idea of creating resources for our players, so the concordance part of Westeros.org, where we sort of collected all the data from the books, just sort of pure setting information. that was entirely intended as a resource for our players based on something that had been done for a similar Wheel of Time game by a fan. And you know, everything else ended up growing from there, and the game part became a very small part. You know, we're still doing it, it's still out there. Somehow we've gotten very busy doing other things, like, you know, writing a book with George, so, you know, we haven't had as much time as we want for it, but everything really grew out of that first contact, so very random, and then somewhere along the way, I guess, you know, George realized that Elio has a very good memory for obscure details, and you know, if you want to know if you've said something about a character in the past or something, you can ask him, and he'll probably come up with where in the books it is as well. Things that, you know, just a plain search might not be able to come up with, he can come up with. So it turned out to be pretty useful in some ways.
Yes, I have said that that Elio knows Westeros better than I do, and it's true. He has a, I don't know, a photographic memory or some eidetic memory for trivia. Although, to be fair, he did lose the big trivia contest at the Glasgow World Cup.
Tiebreaker by one character. Yeah.
So maybe I should have written a book with Dodge. I don't know.
Let me ask you something, actually, George. The internet is something that's kind of developed with your book. It became very popular at the same time as your book started taking off. But you've been writing long before the internet was around. Has being online and having these communities and having the internet in any way changed your writing process or affected the writing process in any way?
No, it hasn't affected my writing process. It has affected my life and my sanity sometimes. You know, for one thing, the interaction with the fans, I mean, with my readers. In the old days before the internet, I would get, you know, a half dozen fan letters a year that would be delivered by the post office, you know, through my publisher. They would write my publisher, and my publisher would forward the letter, and I would know that I had a fan in South Dakota or something like that who liked the book, and it was always a thrill to get those. Of course, with the internet and the advent of email, that increased, and as the books became more and more successful, that increased even more. And when these websites began to proliferate, there's even more. But there's a dark side of it too. I mean, I've recently been embroiled in some quarrels on the internet, and I've put forward the view that the internet is toxic. As many as good people are on the internet. You know, in the old days, I'm sure there were people out there who hated my books, but they didn't write me. You know, the letters that I got, those half dozen letters were all, "Oh, you're wonderful. I read your book, and it's the greatest book I ever read, and I've never written an author before it, but now I'm writing you." You know, I still get those letters. I get hundreds of those letters and emails, but now, thanks to the wonders of the internet, I also get the letters saying that I suck and my books are trash, and you know, or they used to love my books, but now they don't love my books. Why they feel compelled to write and tell me this, I have no idea. I mean, there are many writers out there whose books I don't like, but I don't write these writers letters saying I don't like their books. But something about the internet has empowered all the assholes in the world to take to the computer and feel that the people that they dislike would like to know their opinion, and this is not true. So I don't know. The internet is a strange and sometimes scary phenomenon.
So does anyone have any question? Oh, loads of questions now. So let's start with you.
Hi, my name is Anna, and I wonder, is there any fan reactions that you have been surprised by? Like, is there a character that's more popular than you thought, or have people been shocked by something you didn't think we would be shocked at?
I'm reasonably certain what people will be shocked by. You know, I knew that the Red Wedding would provoke a big reaction, and it did. I was pretty confident that, you know, throwing Bran out the window and then killing Ned in the first book would get reactions, and indeed they did. All of those worked exactly the way it did. To the extent that things have surprised me, they tend to be smaller things. I guess maybe I should not have, I don't know, how do I phrase this without getting myself in terrible trouble? I guess I don't understand women, but I was definitely, you know, way back when surprised by the number of women who reacted positively to characters like Theon and the Hound as dashing romantic figures. The San kind of thing took me by surprise, I must admit, and even more so the women who, and there are some who really like Theon. So that surprised me. Sometimes I get reactions to extremely minor characters, which, you know, surprise me. You know, I've had letters from people who tell me that Lord Blackwood is their favorite character. He's had like 3 lines, you know? I think that's what is known in the trade as the Boba Fett syndrome. You know, a character who hardly appears but has something vaguely cool about him. People make him cool, and of course Lord Blackwood has a cloak made of raven feathers. That's his single distinguishing characteristic, but some people think that's cool enough that he becomes their favorite character. So little things like that do tend to surprise me much more than big things. Do you see surprising reactions from, you're a lot more in it with Westeros, and the things that are being discussed on the boards and all that stuff?
Mainly it's the people who come up with the increasingly harebrained theories about things, and people who are very desperate to pass the time, and people who yell "get hype" about various topics. I won't share a litany of strange theories, however. They're for the books to resolve. So, but there's some really, really strange ones out there.
I get a question from Gothenburg. Hi, Gothenburg. That I feel warmly about myself, so I'm going to ask this one. What's your favorite cheese?
My favorite cheese?
Yes.
My favorite Westeros cheese or my favorite real-world cheese?
Like real-world cheese, maybe.
My favorite I like all cheese, actually, but I'm a big cheese guy. But my favorite cheese is cheddar, and the sharper the better.
Yes.
I've never seen the point of mild cheddar. You know, you want sharp and extra sharp and very extremely extra sharp and sharper than that.
Like super extra sharp.
Then I like it. Yeah.
Yeah, I think with whiskey as well, like a whiskey cheddar, that's really good. And could you explain the rules of Sylvas is from Malmö?
Sylvas, no, I can't. I've actually turned down a number of offers from game companies who want to market Sylvas, who want to come up with rules for a game. But, you know, some things are better suggested than shown. Like it's long been a rule of writing, if one of your characters is a great poet, do not quote any of his poetry unless you yourself are a great poet, which most writers are not. Otherwise you'll embarrass yourself. Sylvas in the books is a war game played over a board. It has elements of chess and elements of stratego and elements of various other war games. But it's a game of a great complexity. It's a game of great profundity. It's a game like chess, which is a game that's, you know, 500 years old and that people play and analyze and go over. Is it likely that any game company I license the rights to develop it could come up with a game to equal chess by working on it for a year? No, they would come up with a game that might be pleasant to play and people would play it for a few years and then it'd be time for another game. So it's better to suggest the profundity and the complexity and the symbolism of Sylvas rather than to come up with an actual set of rules for it.
Good answer. Do you have any author that you would like to work with? Do you have like a dream co-author? Question from Gothenburg.
You know, I don't really work with co-authors very much. I edit authors. You know, Gardner Dozois and I do books, and I've had the great pleasure of publishing stories by people like Joe Abercrombie and Patrick Rothfuss, fantasy writers, but also by people from other fields. You know, we're doing a lot of these cross-genre anthologies. So we had a story from Rogues by Gillian Flynn, just won the world, the Edgar Award, and she's a terrific writer. I was thrilled to work with her. You know, there are other mystery writers. I published stuff by Lawrence Block. He's amazing. I've published stuff by Diana Gabaldon, but there are a lot of other great writers out there that I'd love to do more anthologies and work with, both inside the field and outside the field. But, you know, when I was young, I collaborated with a lot of writers. But at a certain point, that's a good thing for a young writer to do. You can learn from each other. But at a certain point, you find your own voice, and then you don't want to work with anybody else anymore. You just want to do your own thing.
Yeah. Well, except with Linda and Elio for the World of Ice and Fire, of course.
Yeah, that was sort of a different situation.
Yeah.
But,
yeah. So, any questions? Yes. I'm gonna be working my way back here. Well, let's do it.
Yep. Hi, my name is Philip, and I have a question about, like, when you're writing the different conflicts in Westeros, do you ever, like, personally pick any sides, or feel that one side fights for a more just cause objectively than the other?
yeah, certainly. I mean, I've often said that I believe in gray characters. I don't believe in black and white characters. I don't want to write the band of heroes on one side and the orcs on the other side. But that's not to say that that all characters are equally gray. You know, some are very dark gray, and some are mostly white, but they still have occasional flaws in them. You know, I've always been fascinated by human beings and all their complexity, and even human beings who do appalling things. You know, the question is why? Why do they do appalling things? And it's interesting to get inside their head and see why. You know, some of my viewpoint characters have done some incredibly reprehensible things. Theon, for example, or Victorian Greyjoy. Why? Why have they done those things? Were they just like born a monster? Weren't they born you know, a cute little kid running around and saying, "Why is the sky blue, mommy?" and, you know, wanting to be loved and all that? We all start out that way, right? But things happen to us along the way that lead us to junctures in our life where we make decisions. And those decisions and the consequences of them color everything that comes after and colors the perception of the people. I mean, I got a tour through here beforehand, and we were being shown some of the armor and the artifacts of the various Swedish kings, Gustavus Adolphus, and Charles XII, and some of these others. And, you know, you look at them and see, what's the verdict of history on these men? Are these heroes? Are they villains? Are they great people, or people that we should despise? I mean, they're fascinating characters because of their very complexity.
Yes. Do you have anything to?
So I actually, speaking about, I mean, when you mentioned great people or not, I mean, I think there was once back in the day sort of a split in how you viewed history. Out of Romanticism kind of came the great man theory of history, that history was made by great men, and more modern history is much more of a historiography of societies, of sociology. To me, when I read *The Song of Ice and Fire*, it feels very much of a somewhat romantic take in that sense. It's the characters are great men doing great things, and yet, when you come to *A Feast for Crows*, to me, that's a novel where you say, let's step back and let's see what these great men have wrought. Is that something that you did deliberately?
Yeah.
For a lot of authors, it would be typical to go to the next battle and not go to the aftermath. And what did you feel was the motivation behind that for you? What made you so interested in that?
You know, Shakespeare has, in Henry V, there's a sequence right before the Battle of Agincourt where Prince Hal, Henry V, is in disguise, and he's wandering among his men. And, you know, some of the common men are saying, I hope that the king's cause is just, because if it's not, you know, the awful price we're going to pay in severed limbs and slaughtered and lakes of blood and all that. And Hal reacts very negatively to this and gives a long speech about it's not for you, peasant, to judge whether the king's cause is just. It's, you know, God will weigh on this and all that. Shakespeare, of course, writing during the Tudor dynasty to appease the Tudor kings. But it's a profound question that's often asked. And the truth is we look at war through most of human history, and you can ask, were any of them just, you know? Were the wars that, I mean, Charles XII, who's a fascinating character who I've read about and studied, you know, came to the crown at 14 years of age, died at 36, spent his entire reign fighting, hardly was ever home, one war or another. Were any of these wars necessary? Were any of these wars worth anything? Did it improve anything for anybody, except for him, you know, his legend and whatever? You know, you look at some of these wars in medieval times, and it's like, what difference did it make to the common man which lord had dominion over them? It's not like they were fighting for political systems or for anything like that. It was all kind of the same, you know, and you really wonder about it. I don't think that's true of all wars, but it's certainly true of many of them if you study history, and that's something I want my readers to ask themselves about it. You know, Tolkien and most fantasists make it very clear that the war is worthwhile, because after all, it's like, you know, evil slavering orcs are coming, and if they win, they're going to, you know, kill everybody and eat man flesh, and great darkness will settle over the earth. Well, okay, yeah, but let's not make it that easy.
Is there any like special culture? Do you research cultures when you write the books, like for inspiration?
To some extent, sure.
Yeah.
Sure.
Do you have any examples?
Well, I've drawn heavily on the Hundred Years' War and the Wars of the Roses, and to a less extent on the Crusades and some of the other wars. So I've researched those too. I mean, I don't do primary research. Let me make it clear. I don't make any claims to be a professional historian. You know, I read popular histories. It's the stories that fascinate me, the betrayals and the battles and all the shifting alliances and the politics and all of that stuff, the great Shakespearean stuff. I don't want to. I've occasionally stumbled on a book while researching on, you know, the growth of crop rotation in medieval Europe, and I find it not of great use. And if I had a chapter about crop rotation, I don't think you people would enjoy it much either. So that's the stuff the professional historians are writing about.
We have a question also. One of your readers in Stockholm wants to see more of the lands of the south. Do you have any plans, like Sotheros? Are there? How do you pronounce that?
I don't know. Sothorios.
Sothorios. Oh, yeah. Are we going to hear more about them?
Probably not. I mean, maybe an occasional cryptic sentence here and there that, you know, Elio and Linda will put on their Westeros Maesters page and their bullet lists that they have there. You know?
Anything cryptic goes there.
Yeah, you can just wave if you want the mic. Sorry.
Those bullet lists were the beginning, of course, of the world of Ice and Fire. You know, I mean, when I'm about to write something about Norvos, I go to their page and say, "What have I said about Norvos?" Oh, I've said that everybody there has a pet grasshopper and and they talk backwards. Okay. Now I have to add more stuff to that. So.
Very good system.
It was tough to, you know, like, okay, now I write the histories of 9 free cities, and there were some cities where there were quite a few things that I could use, and there were other cities where there was basically nothing about you. Yes, they keep pet grasshoppers, they talk backwards. That was all there was. So I had to make up stuff.
Yeah, that was one of the parts that was, like, as we started writing The World of Ice and Fire, became to us, like, increasingly clear. We thought, we'll just get a few notes from you, and we'll fill out the rest based on just some notes. And we realized, like, there was such a disparity between certain regions, that you had, like, a lot about Bravos, for example, and you had almost nothing about Lorath. And so then we're like, how are we gonna, what kind of notes are we gonna get from George to kind of resolve that? And what we got instead was thousands and thousands of words about these magnificent, wonderful things. And we would wake up in the mornings, George, when you sent it to us, I guess it was evening for you, it would be early morning for us. We'd be getting up at like 5 a.m. to check, what has George sent us now? It was very exciting.
Actually, there, I wanted to follow up with a question because it's kind of intrigued us. I mean, obviously there were a lot of things that sort of took off in your mind. Was there anything in particular that you found yourself surprisingly fascinated with as you were writing and realized that you had a lot more to say than you thought?
You know, when my storytelling, you know, gene kicks in, then I do get carried away here. And it's a lot of fun. You know, I don't know if it's been published here in Sweden, but a couple years before The World of Ice and Fire, there was the map book, The Lands of Ice and Fire. Have any of you seen that? Has that been published here? It's not actually a book. It's a, you know, a book-like object that's a box, and inside there are these poster-sized maps. You know, this is how the novels get delayed with stuff like this, let me tell you. So my publisher comes to me and they say, we want to do a book just of the maps. We want to make posters of the maps. And, you know, we'll pay you a lot of money and you won't have to do any work because we'll just take the maps and we'll blow them up to poster size and issue them. We'll do them in color, and they'll be real nice, and we'll get professional map makers. And I said, "Oh, that sounds good. You know, yeah, send me a lot of money, and you do that, and I'll just keep writing my books." And then they say, you know, I signed a contract, and I get a lot of money, and months pass, and then I get a call and saying, "You know, we took the maps that were in the books, and we blew them up to poster size. There's an awful lot of blank space on them." And they don't look very good. Could you, like, fill in some more rivers and mountains and towns and stuff like that? So, okay, so I'm making up mountains, I'm making up towns. It's harder than you think, you know? You gotta kind of make sense of the geography, and the rivers have to flow in the right direction, and you gotta name everything, which is pretty damn tough, you know, because all the good names have been used in fantasy here, unless you make up names that are just like nonsense syllables, which you can do, of course. A lot of fantasy writers do. They have just horrible names that obviously have been generated on the internet by a fantasy name generator. I've tried to use those, and they're great if you want everybody named Grizdazzle. But otherwise, you find yourself, okay, mountains here. There'll be, let's see, the Misty Mountains. No, oh, wait a minute, Tolkien used the Misty Mountains. There'll be the Rocky Mountains. Oh, no, there really are Rocky Mountains. The Pointy Mountains. That's stupid, no. And you wind up going until you finally come up with a good name for the mountains. And filling in north and south, well, my maps of those were pretty detailed already, but I did have to make them even more detailed because now they're blown up to poster size. But then I have to fill in Essos. And Essos, there was, you know, there was a lot less. And, you know, my map of the Dothrak I see, there was an 8.5, 11 piece of paper on which I had Vise Dothrak, and the rest said Dothrak I see. So I had like a blank, I gotta invent a lot of stuff for that here. So I'm filling that in. And on the edge of the map, on the edge of all the maps that I had drawn up to that point, was the city of Karth, where Dany reaches and has adventures, and then she turns around. She's been going in one direction, now she turns around and goes back the other way, making her way back toward Westeros. But there's a scene in one of the books where Zaro's own Doxos comes to Dany, and he presents her with a huge tapestry of the world, in which the city Qarth is at the center. This, of course, implies that there's as much to the east of Qarth as there is to the west of Qarth. So now my publisher's saying, what about what's to the east of Qarth? You know, people have read about this tapestry. They want to see the rest of the world here. And so now I'm drawing what's on the other side of Qarth, which led to an interesting discrepancy because I had some very early primitive maps about what's on the other side of Qarth. And I gave those maps to HBO at a certain point, and HBO started issuing maps which used those maps. But when I was doing the map book, I looked at those maps and said, this doesn't work. I don't like this. I don't like the way it's out. And I completely threw those out, and I redesigned everything east of Qarth into something that I like a lot better. So the Game of Thrones world is significantly different from the Ice and Fire world, and it's even if it's basic geography because of that change. But then, you know, I had blank pages east of Qarth, so I filled it in, and with rivers and mountains and valleys and dead cities and live cities, and, you know, making as much east of Qarth as was west of Qarth, so we could have maps of it. And I ran out of names, you know. At the end here, I was making tributes. I put in Carcosa, which I figured nobody would get because it's a really obscure reference. I didn't know True Detective was going to pick up the fucking thing a couple years later. And I put up Kadath by the Great Wasteland. These are Lovecraftian references and all that. Little tip of the hat to H.P. Lovecraft. So I put all that in. You know, the story was never going to go there. I figured, it's just a map. I'll put in a little obscure thing. Some of the real hardcore fans will get a kick out of it. Yep. And that's fine. So the map book comes out, and I've done all this time inventing cities and mountains and filling in maps. And I think I'm never going to have to worry about it. Well, here comes the world of Ice and Fire. And here comes the notes, well, what about Yeti? We need an article about Yeti. What are you going to say about the Jogos Nye? You better tell us something about that. So now I'm writing entire articles on the history of these places that I kind of had to invent in order to have something on the map, because I said the tapestry I had Qarth in the middle. But you know, once I got into it, it was fun. You know, I'm inventing, you know, I mean, I could probably go off and write stories set in Yeti with all of the various colored emperors, and I'm inventing, and, you know, great emperors and weird emperors and stuff like that, and the history of Leng and all of that. So that was cool. That's another thing I stole from Lovecraft. You know, when you steal from one previous writer, that's plagiarism, but when you steal from many of them, it's research. So keep that in mind. So you guys probably picked up on all of that, right?
Yeah, picked up on all of, oh, sorry. We definitely picked up on a lot of it, and I actually recall a couple of interview requests to us right after True Detective came out, like, wait, Carcosa was on this map, like, before True Detective, like, did George know about it, or what was going on? And it's like, we're trying to explain to him, well, this is a reference from Lovecraft, and they're just sharing the, it's actually a writer before that, I forget,
Robert Chambers.
Robert Chambers before that, but it was being, you know, the Yellow King and all this. So, but no, it was very cool to see it, and people had great fun with the Lovecraftian stuff, and in the world of Ice and Fire, there's this oily black stone that shows up in all these strange places, and people have
gone nuts for that one in particular. That's being discussed.
Speaking of cool things, like people find the oily black stone like really, really interesting, and who can say it might mean something.
You know, I like mystery. I like unexplained things. To me, it makes the world richer. It makes it cooler if there's stuff in the world. I mean, Lovecraft, who I made these notes to, created this cosmology that he never explained. You know, there were common references to stories, and he hinted at unspeakable mysteries and histories and, you know, vast aeons of lost civilizations and alien races and dark gods living among us. But it was all very disturbing and very mysterious and very evocative. After he died, August Derleth, who was another writer and a huge Lovecraft fan, completed many of his incompleted stories and really regularized this. Durless was not nearly the writer Lovecraft was, but he was a very methodical man. So he went through and he came up with, well, yeah, here's how you put all this together, and here's the entire history of all of the denizens in the Lovecraft world, and here they all related to each other. And to my mind, he completely missed the point. That never should have been done here. We didn't need the history of the great old ones and how they related to the ancient ones and, you know, where the Yoggoth came into it and all of that. They were much better when they were just evocative and mysterious and disturbing than when he put them all in a you know, theology.
Your story with Morning Comes Mistfall, obviously, is about
right.
that very idea. I find the mysteries obviously something that many people are very interested in, and obviously in the novels you have mysteries of the past, mysteries about far places. You also have mysteries very present about current things. I mean, the first book is, you know, who killed John Arryn, and, you know, who really tried to kill Bran. Does mystery fiction, is that something, one of the genres you're really interested in, or is it just the idea of mystery in general that leads you to put that kind of...
Well, I do like mystery fiction. You know, the present day mysteries in Ice and Fire will be resolved mostly. But I also like you know, the ancient histories of, you know, what lies beyond the dark curtain and where the gods came from. No, I'm not going to bring any gods on stage. I'm not going to give you a complete history of Sithorios, and, you know, the mysteries of Yin will have to remain mysterious and for people to you know, to wonder about themselves. I think they're left better that way, a little more mysterious and cool. What was I going to say about the mysteries of? Yeah, I do also believe in a certain amount of ambiguity and subtlety. You know, going through this museum, you look at the display on King Carl XII, who was shot in the head, and no one knows whether he was shot in the head by the enemy or his own men. We don't know that. It's ambiguous. It's right there in display. Maybe he was killed by the Swedes, and maybe by the Norwegians he was fighting. Who killed them? We'll never know. So if that's true in life, why shouldn't it be true in fiction? You know, what happened to the two princes in the tower? You know, people are arguing about that, you know, 500 years later. Who killed them? Were they killed? Were they smuggled out and saved? Who knows? Why shouldn't we have similar mysteries in fiction that we can argue about and wonder about, since they exist in real life?
I was just curious to follow up then, as an author, when you introduce a mystery that you want to leave ambiguous, do you have the answer yourself all the time, or do you leave it ambiguous to yourself as well?
In the vast majority of cases, I know the answer to, you know, things like who killed John Arryn and all of that. Sometimes the answer, when I unfold it in the book, I try to do it fairly subtly. You know, I don't tend to write the classic detective scene where, you know, everybody gets together in one room and he says, and here are the clues, and I have put them together because I am Ellery Queen or Sherlock Holmes or whatever, or Poirot, and here is what my little gray cells have told me. But the answer is there if the reader is paying attention, and you can put it together yourself. So.
Yes, the movie is always scarier before you see the monster, basically.
That is true.
So, let's do an audience question. Yes.
You can be as vague as you want about this question, but which character would you say is the most misunderstood?
Misunderstood? Boy, I don't know. That's a tough one. I understand them all pretty well. I don't know.
From my experience, this is maybe a bias showing here, but from my experience, the character that's been most misunderstood is generally Catelyn Stark, and her relationship with Jon, and what it means about her behavior and what kind of person she is. That's one that a lot of people take issue with. She's a character that gets argued about a lot.
So, hands up. It's the one in the back.
Hello.
Hi.
I'm an avid book reader, and I follow the books, and I never really got into the TV show. But I've always sort of looked on with glee whenever you see posts about shocking things that happen in the television series. And I was wondering, is the TV show going to continue beyond the books to the point where the TV show watchers get that kind of power over us readers?
Well, you know, they may to some extent. There's no doubt about that. But on the other hand, the TV show and the books are diverging more and more, which is, of course, something that I've been saying would happen for 5 years now. And yet, now that it's happening, people are surprised. But I've been talking about the butterfly effect since season 1. You know, when you introduce any change, it creates greater changes down the road. You know, you make a small change that seems insignificant, and then you have to make a bigger change because you made that small change, and then you have to make a still bigger change, and pretty soon you're on completely unfamiliar territory. The show now has, God, it must be a dozen characters, maybe as many as 20, who are dead on the show but alive in the books. At first it was just 1 or 2, you know, Mago, Eerie, Cheekwe, but it's expanded season by season. Pip, Gren, now, well, you saw all the people who died in the last season, and this will accelerate even next season. So obviously, I got a lot of characters running around in the books who are still alive and kicking, and they're dead. And there's also characters like one of the chapters I didn't read that I read in Frankfurt, or Hamburg rather, the Arion chapter is entirely composed of characters who don't even exist in the show. So, of course, there's going to be huge differences. So you may see some extremely shocking things in the show that come up in the next season or 2. But I'm not sure you could consider them spoilers, because they're never going to happen in the books. They can't happen in the books because the show and the books have gone down different roads.
Yeah. Hi, I was wondering about the medical knowledge of the maesters in Westeros. Because, for example, Jaime's hand, when it's treated, they bring out the big guns, the Qyburn, who seems to have great knowledge about the human anatomy, and so on. And is his treatment very standard for maesters, or is it exceptional that Jaime survives? Because he suffers some gangrene, if I remember correctly.
Well, I wanted, you know, I made a deliberate decision when the book began to have the maesters and have Westeros in general have better medical knowledge than the real-life Middle Ages. Mostly because I didn't want everybody dying at 26. So it is generally improved. The maesters have improved the standard of hygiene, and they understand certain practices and they can do things better. Also, though, they have magic, which doesn't always work because it's magic, and magic is unreliable, but sometimes it works. And, you know, it brings people back from the dead and things like that. So that also changes things and is an adjunct to their general healing skills. It's odd, though, that some of the things that they practiced in the Middle Ages, which were later rejected, you know, like leeches and maggots, are coming back. Because it turns out that they knew more than we thought they did, and that, you know, maggots actually can perform a function.
Hello, my name is Martin, appropriate it seems. More of a history question than a Song of Ice or Fire question. You mentioned Charles XII and all the other Swedish kings, and if I recall correctly, you mentioned you have read Scandinavian history at college.
Yes, just a general course, though.
But you wrote a short story that was later published as The Siege, I think, about a critical event in Swedish history, forgotten mostly, about the fall of Sveaborg, the Gibraltar of the North.
Right.
If you could tell us something of why you wrote that and what the story entailed, because it's, I should guess most people in here not heard of Sveaborg.
Yes, I wrote that my sophomore year of college at Northwestern University, so I was, 18 years old or something like that. I was taking a course in Scandinavian history, general survey course, and we were assigned to do a term paper. But in those days, I was taking courses in creative writing. I was trying to sell stories. I was sending out science fiction stories and stuff to magazines. Also writing non-science fiction stories and trying to sell those. And whenever I took a course, I would try to convince the professor to let me write a short story instead of a term paper. So I went to that professor in Scandinavian history and said, hey, how about I do fiction, historical fiction? And he said, sure. So I wrote a story about the surrender of Sveaborg in the Russo-Swedish War of 1808, because it was a great historical mystery that I'd come across during a survey course, and I'd read Brunberg's poem about it, or the English translation thereof, and it seemed like a fascinating subject. And hey, I got an A on the paper, and that was pretty good. And 20 years later, I rewrote the story, and I added a time-traveling dwarf, and sold it to Omni and got thousands of dollars. So, so it worked out pretty well. The original story had no time-traveling dwarf, however.
Hi. So far in the story, you've kept expanding the world, character by character, location by location, and you've just told us about there's a lot of places you've introduced that we won't revisit as readers. But are the characters that we haven't been inside the head of as of yet that we will come to know in a point of view? You may be, again, as vague as you want about this, but will we be exploring new characters that we haven't been inside the head of as of yet?
My plan is no, except, of course, for the prologues and epilogues, where, as you know, you usually get into viewpoint of a different point of view character for one chapter. However, that is subject to change. As I write the books, I encounter problems, and sometimes I find that I need a new point of view in order to make it work. I mean, those of you who follow discussions at conventions and other interviews and some of the things I post on my blog will know that with the last book I had a particular trouble with what I called the Milanese knot, with a number of characters arriving in Marine, and I had a bunch of viewpoint characters there already. I had Quentin Martell turning up, I had Tyrion turning up, I had Dany there, and I kept reworking these chapters and rewriting from different point of view and reordering who arrived first and what happened second, and I could never really make the pieces fit and make the story flow the way I wanted to until I finally said, I'm going to give Sir Barristan a viewpoint. He's the one I need there to make it work, make the post-Dany stuff work, make it Tyrion, because Tyrion didn't even speak the language. It was very difficult to write these scenes where Tyrion was the viewpoint character and he didn't know what the fuck anybody was saying. But having Sir Barristan there suddenly made those things work. And, I may find that is necessary again. We'll see. But hopefully it won't be, because I'd actually like to, as you say, the story has been going further and further out, but it's past time that the story turned and started coming together. And that's certainly my overall plan, and that's what I'm working on right now. But fewer viewpoint characters, not more, but I'm not going to make a pledge in blood.
Okay, I know you probably can't tell me any of this, but like any other question. But the best character in the show, and not in the show, not only in the show, in the books, of course, but we never get to be in his head. Peter Baelish. I know you probably can't tell me this, and if you can't, just, is there anything about him you can tell me? Is it possible that he is a Rain or Tarbeck?
Well, I don't know. I suppose anything is possible, but his history is fairly explicit. Is this a theory you've heard before?
I admit it is not a theory I've heard before.
There are many theories. There are many theories out there. Obviously, we have his history as stated in the books. His great-grandfather was from Braavos and all these things. I can't shed anything more on it than George can, so I think that's a pass.
Hi, first of all, cheers from Italy. I have two questions. One, if you have imagined a sort of final reunion of the characters who are actually isolated, for example, Bran and Arya, and where do you take the ideas of the different religions in Westeros? Thank you.
Sorry, I couldn't quite make that out. Could you repeat? No.
Could you repeat?
Which one?
Either one.
The last question.
The last, where do you take the ideas of creating the different religions in Westeros? The Seven Gods.
The different religions?
Yeah. If you ever take ideas from ancient cultures.
Sure, they're all at least partly inspired by real religions. You know, the Faith of the Seven is medieval Catholicism with some fantasy twists. The old gods is you know, Druidism or animism or some of the more primitive religions. Perhaps one of the more interesting things is the Red Guard, which is you know, Zoroastrianism and the Cathar heresy, the so-called Albigensian heresy that swept Europe in, I believe it was the 1100s or 1200s, provoked the Albigensian Crusade. That was a fascinating group of heretics. They claimed to be Christian heretics, but their philosophy was so far removed from Christianity that it was barely qualified, and fascinating story, the Albigensian Crusade.
Should we do more questions, or do you want to get into the fascinating story?
Do you guys have anything more to add on the religions?
What religion is the drowned god is, of course, our Lord and Savior, Shuflu. Shuflu saves in case he gets hungry later. Well, Bear, speaking, I mean, you took the Scandinavian history course in college, and was that just to fill credits, or does something about Scandinavia interested you? I mean, here you are in Royal Armory of Sweden.
What interested me was the fact that I knew nothing about it. You know, I don't know what kind of history you're taught here in Sweden, but as a kid in America growing up, at least back when I did in the 50s and 60s, you know, you get American history, and then you get a course called Western Civilization. And it's like you get them over and over again, you know. You start in grade school, and you get, you know, British colonists, Jamestown, Plymouth Rock, American Revolution, George Washington, Andrew Jackson, ooh, here comes the Civil War, Abraham Lincoln, etc. And then you get, in the next year, then you get the world history, you know, the Egyptians, and then the Greeks, and then the Romans, and Battle of Marathon, and memorizing the dates, and then you go forward, and you get the, you know, you get the Crusades and the Middle Ages, well, the Roman Empire and the Dark Ages and the Middle Ages and all of that stuff, and you follow England mostly. And then you go on to like high school, and you get the same subjects, but just in more detail, you know. Then they tell you all the stuff they taught you in grade school is not actually true. You know, George Washington didn't chop down a cherry tree, and he wasn't standing up when they crossed the Trenton in the boat and all that stuff. So first you get the myths, and then you get a little more realistic. And then you reach college, and you get the same subjects taught over again. But in college, you also have electives where you can take, and history was my minor. So I said, I don't want to hear any more about the Romans or the Greeks or the Battle of Marathon or the Battle of Hastings. I know all that shit. I've been over it like 4 times already. What's the stuff about Scandinavian? I know nothing about them, you know. I know I saw the Vikings once, and that seems sort of interesting, so I'll study that. I also took courses in Chinese history and you know, other exotic courses that covered histories that I'd never previously studied, and of course I found it all fascinating.
Yeah, we're gonna do one last question. And oh my God, you're so eager.
Hi, my name is Emma. I'm wondering, I like reading your not a blog, and you have so many interesting and fun projects going on, and I'm wondering how many projects do you have, and where do you find the time to rest? Kind of. Do you rest?
I have a lot of projects. Maybe too many projects. I don't know. Every time I announce a new one, I get angry fans who write, "Why are you doing something else? You should just be writing Winds of Winter." I have an overall deal with HBO, which means that they pay me vast sums of money to, entirely aside from the vast sums of money they're paying me for Game of Thrones, they pay me other vast sums of money to invent new shows for them. So I invent ideas, and sometimes they say, nah, we don't like that. But other times they say, oh, that's good. And then we go out and we develop the idea and we hire a writer and we write a pilot. So, you know, and if they like the pilot, they make the pilot. And if they like what they make, then you have a new show on the air. And I have like 3 projects like that I've invented as part of my overall deal that are in various stages of development. Will any of them actually become television shows? I got no clue. You know, it's a crapshoot. I mean, in the 1990s, I spent 5 years in development, working for Columbia Pictures and developing pilots for ABC and the Fox network, and I wrote some I thought were good scripts, good shows, but none of them ever went all the way. It's, you know, many pilots are made and things are done. I've got my Wildcard series, which I've been editing for, you know, decades now. It goes back longer than Ice and Fire. It's still ongoing. And other things come my way, you know, and they seem like fun, so I work on them. But one thing that almost all of these other projects have in common is that I'm not doing the writing, or I'm doing a little bit of the writing, but somebody else is doing most of the writing. They may be based on an old script that I wrote a long time ago. They may be based on a short story. For example, we are developing The Skin Trade, my novella that I published, I believe it was 1987, as a potential television series. I wrote the novella, but other people are writing the pilot script. And so if it goes forward, this is the same trick, of course, I use with Elio and Linda, is bring other people abroad and get them to do most of the work. And, you know, that works very well. Although I wound up, somehow you turned that on me, and I wound up doing a hell of a lot of the work anyway.
We said notes. We said notes.
So, you know, I like making stuff up. What can I say? I've been telling stories since I was a kid, and these new projects are exciting. I'd hate to ever think I was just like doing one thing over and over again. And, you know, I hope that some of you guys and some of the other readers out there enjoy the other projects as well as I know you love Westeros and you love Ice and Fire. And I do too, but I also love my other children. And I realized they're not as popular. I hope I never arrive. I mean, I knew Frank Herbert a little. No, he wasn't a close friend or anything, but I met him a little in the last few years of his life. And Frank had actually kind of come to hate Dune by the end. because that was all anybody wanted from him. And he really wanted to write. He had other novels he wanted to write, other worlds and characters he wanted to create. And his publishers and his fans were just saying, oh, we don't care about that, just give us another Dune novel. Okay, thanks for that one. Give us another Dune novel. Okay, that was good. Give us another Dune novel. And I hope I never wind up in that situation. Fortunately, I don't have to because, you know, I'm doing well enough so that when I finish Ice and Fire, I can write pretty much anything I want, and if it only sells 3,000 copies, I won't give a crap. But I hope it won't. And actually, I don't think, even when I finish Ice and Fire, this story will be finished, but I don't think I'll ever be finished with the world. Obviously, I have to finish my sidebars and publish those as the history of the Targaryen dynasty, Fire and Blood. And then I have more Duncan Egg stories to write. I've only got maybe a third of the way through their careers. And then who knows, maybe I'll write a whole series of things set in Yiti and exploring some of the history that I put there. So that's the great thing about creating a world, is you have a world to play in, not just a particular set of characters.
Well, that was the last question. And thank you for taking the time to talk to us. George, Linda, Elio, it's been super, super nice having you guys
Thank
here.
you all for coming, guys.
Yes.